When you want to make a delicious and flavorful vegetable beef soup that tastes like you simmered it for hours and hours and hours, there is a secret that you can use to get that depth of flavor in no time at all. It's a pressure cooker and beef short ribs. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. And today we're going to make a delicious vegetable beef soup in the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker. I'm using the 6.5 quart, but you could do this in the 8 quart, and you could cut the recipe in half and do it in the 5 quart. Or you could do it in your Instant Pot or whatever electric pressure cooker you have handy. This will work perfectly. So one of the things when you're making soup is developing a great flavor, and that is in the broth. Now, you can make bone broth ahead of time and use that, and it'll be absolutely delicious. But a lot of times I want to make soup, and I don't have any bone broth, and it's pretty expensive at the store. So I am going to use some beef short ribs, a few vegetables, and we're going to develop a quick bone broth to start off our soup. And oh my gosh, this makes all the difference in the world. So please give this a try. All right, so what I have here is 1 pound of short ribs, and you can see one is really big, this is gorgeous, by the way, and then one's little puny one. No worries whatsoever what size they are. Just you want 1 pound of them. So for me, this was 2 short ribs. I'm going to season these up with some salt and pepper, but we want to sear them to get some, some browning. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn the Ninja Foodi on, hit the sear saute, high is what we want, and I'm going to put in about a tablespoon of olive oil into the bottom and let that heat up. Then I'm just going to take a salt and pepper blend, which is equal parts salt and pepper. It's 1 teaspoon fine grind sea salt, 1 teaspoon of pepper, and I'm just going to kind of sprinkle this on, and you want to rub it in, okay? You want to get that on the outside, and you want to do it on all sides. I also recommend taking the short ribs out of the refrigerator about 30 minutes before you're going to make the soup, if you have time. All right, that looks great. Now we're just going to wait for the pot to finish heating up, and then I'm going to get these searing, and we're going to sear them on all sides for just a few minutes. Doesn't take very long. Then we'll dump in the rest of our ingredients and get that under pressure. Yay! It was hot enough. All right. Get the other one in. You can see I'm putting it over towards the side. That's because I want it to be in the oil. The Ninja Foodi bottom is convex, so the oil runs to the side. It's not a big deal at all, but I just wanted to put these over to the side. And then just let them sit there until they are able to be lifted up and released. That's how you know that there's a good sear on the bottom. And then I will flip them over to the side. I'm going to even sear the ends. That's not absolutely necessary, but I just usually do it. So it takes, just a few minutes to get through this. All right, so I'm on the last side here. Literally, it took maybe 3 minutes. I mean, you don't have to go for very long. And now we're gonna add in the vegetables. And what I'm using is 1 Vidalia onion that's just cut up in chunks. Just throw those right in the pot there. Now you could continue to sear, and you could get some browning on these vegetables. I usually don't take the time to worry about that. Then I'm using 2 carrots. I didn't even peel them or anything, and they're just broken in half. Just put those in. And 2 stalks of celery. Now this is a little bit more than 2 stalks of celery because I was using the inside, so there's not a whole lot of the stalk part, but a lot of the leaf part. Perfectly fine. Great way to use them up. So now that the beef ribs are completely seared on all the sides, I'm just gonna put them down on the meat side down. It really doesn't matter how you do that. And we're gonna go ahead and put in our 2 cups of beef broth. Now, I know I made a chicken noodle soup that's done kind of similar to this, and people said, well, why are you adding in, at that time, chicken stock when you're making a broth? Well, because making a really good bone broth is about the amount of bones to water. And you can certainly do that if you have a lot of beef bones or a lot of chicken bones and chicken scraps and things like that. You can make a really good bone broth. But I don't have that. I just have these 2 beef ribs, and I would have to maybe put in, 3/4 of a cup of water, and that just wouldn't be enough for our soup. So by starting off with beef stock, I'm just giving it a little boost, helping it out some, because we don't have enough flavor in these bones to make a true bone broth. All right, now we put that in, and then as always, when you sear saute in the inner pot, you want to go along the bottom and make sure nothing has stuck to it, because that can trigger the water notice. And if for some reason you end up getting the water notice with a recipe like this, where there is plenty of liquid in there to go under pressure, it's probably caused by something stuck. Just simply stop the pot, release the pressure manually. When it's safe to open the lid, open up the lid, give a nice scrape on the bottom and make sure everything's loosened up, and then go back under pressure and you should be fine. All right, so now we're gonna put in the remaining salt and pepper that we used to season the beef ribs. Put in 2 bay leaves, and we're gonna put in 1 teaspoon of thyme leaves. This is different from ground thyme. So if you have ground thyme, you just wanna put a pinch in, but these are the dried thyme leaves, and they're gonna work great. That's it, that's all we have to do for now, and we're gonna put the pressure lid on. I'm gonna make sure that we turn the valve here in the back to seal, and we're gonna select pressure, and high is what we want, and we're gonna go for 30 minutes. Now, it's not gonna take that much time for the pot to come up to pressure, just because it's, you know, the pot's hot, some of the ingredients are already warmed through, and it's not that much liquid. So once the pot comes up to pressure, we're gonna go 30 minutes of high pressure, and then we will do a full natural release, which is somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. It just depends, but I think it's been around 30 minutes for me most of the time that I've tested this recipe. So you just let that go. Now, if you needed to go out, like, you know, you wanted to run some errands or whatever, you don't have to worry about being here in an hour, because it can sit, and it can sit on keep warm until you come back. So no problems with that whatsoever. And that is the beauty of making soups, in my opinion, in a pressure cooker. It's not so much that you save a ton of time, because, you know, sure, you could do this on the stove and simmer it, but you have so much evaporation when you're simmering on the stove. You have to constantly make sure you have enough water in there and kind of babysit it. And I don't like to babysit my food, so I like to now set it, forget it, and I know I have at least, you know, 50 minutes I can go do something else. So it took a good 35 minutes for the button in the back, which is either silver or red, or call it the pin or the button, to depress. So that was a little bit longer than my test batches, but no worries, just let it go, okay? Just let it go till it naturally releases, and then you can open up the lid. All right, so now we've got our beef ribs, and we've got all the other stuff that we put in there. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of get this off, and I'm gonna put the beef ribs on my cutting board, because we are going to put those back in. But we want to get the vegetables out that we cooked with first and add in some fresh that will stay in our soup. I'm going to go ahead and put those there. And now I'm just going to go through this broth and pull out the solids here. You could also pour the whole thing in, which I may end up doing, just to get everything out if I need to. But any little juices that go into the bottom here of this measuring cup, I'm putting back in. And I'm even gonna press it down a little bit to make sure that I get all of the good broth. Now for this recipe, I'm not gonna worry about rinsing out my pot. I do that with my chicken noodle soup, but with the beef soup, you don't need to. I'm just gonna pour this back in and get the stuff off the edges. It's perfectly fine. All right, now let me see, what can I use to press this down? Liberty, I'm making beef soup now, not chicken soup. It's all good. If you saw my last video that I did with chicken soup, Liberty was going a little crazy too that day. That's our rooster. All right, that's good. Just set this over here. Real quick before I'm gonna set this on this wrapper, so let me talk about that real quick. I wanted to show you the kind of beef that I use, because we're gonna add more beef in. I mean, that's not nearly enough beef for a good big pot of vegetable beef soup. So I'm using a top round that came in a package. So it's kind of like you would see labeled London broil, maybe, or you could even use a flank steak. You can really use anything you want, because you want to cube it into 1-inch pieces, and even chuck roast will cook when it's real small like that in the pressure cook time that we're about to do, which is only 2 minutes. Okay, so set that to the side. Now I'm going to pour this back in. Just sort of clean out those edges so those seasonings are back in the broth. Perfect. Set this over here. All right. Now I'm going to put the beef back in. You could take it off the bone, but I don't until the very end, because I think we want to get all the benefits of the flavor from the bone that we can. So we're going to go back under pressure with the fresh vegetables, and I'm going to leave it right there like that. All right, 1 pound of whatever type of beef you want to use, cubed into 1-inch pieces. We're going to put that in. And now I'm going to add in some carrots, potatoes, and onions. We're also going to put mixed vegetables in, which you can do at this time if you wanted to. But what I found, if you pressure cook with those frozen mixed vegetables that we're going to use, which have green beans and peas and corn and even some small carrots, if you pressure cook, your green beans are going to look very dark, like dark brown, not brown, but dark green. You know, they just don't look fresh and vibrant. So I've decided to skip pressure cooking them, and we add them in at the end, and I just simmer them for a few minutes, and then they're cooked. But you could do it either way. It works fine. Absolutely fine if you put them in now. And in fact, I have a batch where I pressure cooked, so I'll pull that out and show you so you can make an informed decision. Okay, so I'm going to put in the carrots and the celery, which is 2 carrots sliced in about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch round, and then about a 1/2 inch diced up celery, 2 to 3 stalks, however many you want. And then 1 Vidalia onion that I have chopped into about a 1/4 inch dice, and that's going to go right in too. And now let me talk about the broth a little bit before we get to putting the potatoes in, because this might seem like it's just not enough. And originally I made the soup, I started testing it with 4 cups of beef stock. What happened is it was just too soupy by the time the meat cooked, released the juices, by the time the vegetables cooked, and then the frozen vegetables got in. It was just really, really soupy and not flavorful enough. So I decided to cut down on the beef stock to 2 cups. At the very end, if your meat did not release as many juices as mine did, or you needed a little bit thinner, a little bit more liquidy, add in some more beef broth, okay? No problems there. But I recommend starting with just 2 cups, because you'll be amazed at how much liquid we get after we pressure cook this second time. All right, and then I'm gonna add in 1 pound of potatoes, which is about 3 potatoes. You could add however many or little as you want, or skip them. It's totally up to you. And I'm using Yukon Gold. I'm using Yukon Gold, which is my preference for soups. You can use russet, but cut them bigger, because they do tend to kind of fall apart in the soup. Then you'll end up, it'll thicken the soup, and it'll be more kind of like a stew or something like that. So I recommend using the Yukon Gold, but that is totally up to you, of course. And another reason why I like using the Yukon Gold is I don't have to peel them. I love that. So I'm just going to cut these into about 1.5 inch bite-sized pieces. You know, I mean, this is a soup, so I don't make my vegetables quite as big as I do if I'm making a stew. Now we just throw those in. I'll do that with the remaining, and then we will go under pressure for 2 minutes, and we will do another natural release for about 10 to 15 minutes. It's really up to you. Sometimes I just walk away and let it go the whole way. It's not going to hurt anything. Don't worry about that. And then sometimes I get impatient, and I flip the switch, so to speak, at about 10 or 15 minutes. So either way, it's okay. It'll work. If for some reason your beef, I should say, is not cooked enough, and because you maybe jumped the gun on the natural release and it's just not tender enough, just use the sear saute and simmer it for a little bit, and that will definitely fix that problem for you. How about this? How about I do a 10-minute natural release on this video? Because I have done a full natural release and I've done a 15-minute natural release. And I think the first time I did it, I might have done 10 minutes, but I used totally different meat and wasn't happy with that. So I switched it up. I'll do a 10-minute this time, and then I can tell you if that works with what ingredients I'm using today. This is the first time I'm using the top round. I used a sirloin the other time, and then I've also tried it with oxtails, which I thought was going to be delicious. No, it was way too fatty of a soup. It didn't work as well, and it was almost impossible to get the meat off of the oxtail bones. And I think that's in part just because of the oxtail that I had. But anyway, I really recommend using the beef short ribs. They're just so much easier to deal with. Okay, I don't know if I mentioned, because I'm kind of going through this pretty fast, I did season those cubes of beef with a half a teaspoon of pepper and a half a teaspoon of salt. All right, that's it for right now. We're gonna go ahead and put the pressure lid on. We're gonna go back under pressure, high is what we want, and 2 minutes. Make sure the valve in the back is to the seal position, and then I will let it go under pressure cook for 2 minutes. When 10 minutes is up, we'll do release the rest of the pressure. We'll see how that beef cooked. All right, so it took about 2.5 minutes for the pressure to release, and that's pretty normal. And now I'm gonna open up that lid, do that away from you because it gets steamy. All right, so it doesn't look like much right now, but it will look like a beautiful vegetable beef soup in just a minute. First thing I'm gonna do is grab the short ribs out. All right. Now, it was funny. As soon as I closed the pressure lid and we went off camera, I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot the tomatoes, the can of tomatoes. No worries, though, because they can go in right now, and that's what I'm going to do. Just add in a can of fire-roasted tomatoes. But usually I pressure cook for the 2 minutes with the tomatoes in, but it's not going to make any difference. They're fully cooked, so they just need to warm up. And then the other thing we're going to do, of course, is get these vegetables in. And this is 2 cups of just a mixed vegetable, you know, the small kind. You could skip this. I mean, you could use fresh string beans and throw them in now, and fresh corn. I mean, you could, you know, don't have to use frozen, but I have these and I'm gonna use them up. So that's 2 cups of the frozen mixed vegetables. And stir those in. And then let's go ahead and get this on sear saute just to cook those vegetables, which takes no time at all. Now look at that. Now that looks like a beautiful vegetable beef soup. All right, so let's get this on sear saute, and I'm just gonna take it down to medium and hit the start button. Meantime, I'm gonna get these shredded up and added back in because we're definitely gonna use the beef off of these short ribs to add to our soup. All right, let's go ahead and see how this is. Oh, perfect. Oh, wonderful. Absolutely perfect. All right, so now I'm just gonna get the meat off of these short ribs, and I just do that with a fork and just sort of pull it off. I do try to get rid of any fat that I see, just because, you know, you don't want to bite into fat. It's not gonna render anymore, so we'll just get that out of the way. All right. There we go. I got all that meat off the bones, and we're gonna put that right back in. So this is probably a total of, I would say maybe 1.25 to 1.5 pounds of beef after you take out, you know, the little bit of gristle there and the bone. So if you weren't gonna use the bones, or maybe you had an old, you know, beef soup bone that you wanted to use instead, which would be perfectly fine, just use about 1.5 pounds of beef, and you'll be good to go. And that's a good ratio. And look at that, it's absolutely gorgeous. It's probably ready for me to try. So I'm gonna clean this up, and I'm gonna show you the difference after I put this into my bowl, so you can see what it looks like if you pressure cook the frozen vegetables before, you know, for the 2-minute time, or if you wait and add them afterwards, okay? All right, so it's looking good. It's been simmering over there for about 5 minutes or so. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it off. The vegetables look good. I haven't tasted them. They might not be done yet. It's all right. You can always go longer. So let me get out some that I can taste for you. Okay. Now, a couple of differences between these two bowls of soup. Number one, well, they look about the same as far as broth goes, but this was a little bit thicker, and I think it's still a little bit thicker even after I heated it up, and that's because I used russet potatoes in there, and the russet, some of them fell apart and sort of thickened it up. It's still delicious, no problems. But the main difference is this is with pressure cooked vegetables, and the corn's fine, the carrots are fine, it's string beans. So if you want your beans to be bright green like this, you don't want to pressure cook. You want to add them at the end. If you don't care that they are darker in color, then pressure cook them. Just as easy. So either way is perfectly fine. And if you don't like tomatoes, you don't have to add them in. That's no problem at all either. Of course, if you don't like any of this, you don't have to add it in. So soup is one of those great things that you can customize to your liking. All right, so let me go ahead and taste the broth without anything else here to see, did we get that richness of flavor from those beef short ribs? We did. Oh man, that's good. It's like, oh, I can't even describe it because like if you just use regular beef stock, it would be good, but this is good plus plus, you know, it's just better. It's just better. So sometimes it's worth taking the time. Now, if you were in a real hurry and you didn't have the time, well then skip that part. Use beef broth, skip the first 30-minute pressure cook time and do it that way. It's perfectly fine. But this is good plus plus is what I'm going to call it. Excellent plus plus. How's that? All right, let's go ahead and get some vegetables here. Hot. Terrific. All right, so let's taste some of the short ribs since I've already tasted the other beef, which was delicious. All right, let's get this. Looks so good. That's good. That's that beef short rib. I could definitely do this with all short ribs. I would use 3 pounds, and it's gonna be a little bit fattier, so I would probably let it cool and skim some of the fat off before I went to the second part of the soup. That's what I would do, but hey, if you don't mind the fat being in there, make it up. It's gonna be rich and delicious however you do it. You're gonna love the soup. It's comforting, it's easy, and it is excellent plus plus.